They said the courtyard had never been quieter than on the day the tea was served. Not during the bombings. Not during the riots. Not even the morning they carried the old president's portrait down the hall like a relic of something half-forgotten and fully feared. But that afternoon, beneath the wide-armed neem tree, even the birds fell silent. Because everyone who mattered in the new government was there, and they all knew something the others didn't. Captain Ibrahim Traoré sat at the center of it all. He wasn't wearing medals or draped in flags. His boots were dusty, and his uniform plain. No gold trim. No ceremonial pins. Just a man with tired eyes and a stare that could empty a room. He wasn't supposed to be a president. And yet, he was the only one everyone obeyed, even when he said nothing. The tea arrived with the usual ritual, a tray of 5 cups, no markings, no ceremony, no difference. A soldier, young, expressionless, set the tray down between them like it weighed nothing. But it did. It carried history. And it carried intent. Traoré nodded politely, like he always did, reaching for a cup without even glancing at it. That was the moment the silence shattered. His hand paused, hovering. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't staged. There was no gasp, no outcry. Just a pause long enough for the old men in tailored uniforms to shift in their seats. For the aides to stop mid-sentence. For the birds to hold their breath. Traoré's fingers didn't close around the ceramic. Instead, he looked up. Not at the cup. At the man who had placed it there. Whose idea was the tea today? He asked, voice even. Too even. Colonel Coulibaly, the one who smiled too easily and blinked too little, cleared his throat. Just tradition, Captain. Hospitality. Tradition, Traoré repeated, his tone dipping just enough to suggest something old, something tired, something dangerous. I like tradition. He stood slowly, taking his time, as if the heat made his bones heavy. Then, with deliberate calm, he reached not for his own cup, but for the one furthest from him. He lifted it gently, turned it in his hand, and walked it over to Coulibaly. Colonel, he said. You pour the tea. Coulibaly hesitated. My aide did. Then drink this one, Traoré said. It wasn't a suggestion. It wasn't even a command. It was a judgment passed without gavel or gun. The air shifted. Jaws clenched. Eyes darted. Somewhere far off, a truck backfired like a warning shot. Coulibaly laughed, dry and sharp. Captain, surely you don't think. I think, Traoré interrupted, that trust is earned. Not served. The colonel's fingers twitched toward the cup, but he didn't take it. His eyes flicked to the others, generals. Advisors. Men who had worn their loyalty like cloaks until it was time to shed them. And that was when Captain Traoré knew. He turned to the young soldier who had brought the tray. The boy's hands were shaking. Not a tremble. A quake. Sweat darkened his collar. His lips pressed so tightly together they turned white. His eyes screamed the confession his mouth would never speak. Your boots, Traoré said to him. They're not regulation. The boy blinked, confused. You've never served outside the capital, Traoré continued. You have no dust. No scarring. No wear. You're not a soldier. You're a message. And just like that, everything broke. 2 guards lunged forward, grabbing the boy's arms before he could run. The tray tipped, clattering to the ground. One of the cups rolled, spinning in circles, before tipping on its side and spilling a thin stream of tea into the dirt. No one moved to stop it. Traoré didn't yell. He didn't bark orders. He just looked at the boy with something between pity and fury. You were meant to deliver poison, he said softly. But you delivered truth instead. The boy wept then. Quietly. Bitterly. But no one looked away, not from the boy, not from Traoré, and especially not from Coulibaly, whose hands had gone perfectly still. I asked once, Traoré said, if we could build a nation where loyalty wasn't bought, where knives didn't hide in smiles. I was told I was too young to understand power. He stepped forward, lifting the untouched cup from the dirt. They were wrong, he said. And he poured the contents out into the soil, letting the earth drink what was never meant for him. No one spoke as the guards dragged the boy away. Not even the colonel. Especially not the colonel. The courtyard, moments ago simmering with quiet pleasantries and hollow laughter, now sat beneath the weight of something heavier than silence, exposure. Not a single word from Traoré had been shouted, and yet it felt like the whole regime had been slapped awake. Traoré didn't sit back down. He turned to the assembled officers, letting his gaze rest briefly on each one. Not with rage. With something worse, calculation. You are all invited here, he said, not for tea. For trust. His words dropped like stones. Final. Cold. There are meetings happening in this country, he continued, where decisions are made behind doors I never built. There are foreign agents in places we once called sacred. And there are men who think that if I disappear quietly, perhaps with a sip, everything goes back to how it was. He turned and began to walk the perimeter of the courtyard, each step slow, his boots grinding against the gravel. But nothing ever goes back. He stopped before Coulibaly. The colonel didn't rise. He sat like stone, lips tight, jaw clenched. You always liked control, Traoré said. But you mistook silence for submission. And that mistake. He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. Instead, he turned to his security chief. Escort the colonel to the east compound. Full isolation. No communication. No exit. Coulibaly stood then, fast and angry. On what grounds? Traoré didn't flinch. On the grounds that I still breathe. 2 guards stepped forward. The colonel looked around for allies. Found none. As he was taken away, the other men remained still, unsure if moving might mark them next. One by one, they lowered their eyes. Not out of shame, but fear. And in that stillness, Traoré looked down at the last intact teacup, the one that hadn't spilled, hadn't cracked. He picked it up again, held it to the light. A simple vessel. Harmless. Familiar. That was the point, wasn't it? Betrayal always wore the face of comfort. Let this cup be a lesson, he said aloud, turning it in his palm. That danger doesn't come with thunder. Sometimes it arrives as a smile. Sometimes it's served with sugar. No one laughed. Not even nervously. Later that evening, in a secured underground chamber beneath the old archives, Traoré sat at a war table not meant for war. A map of the capital stretched before him. Dotted lines. Red circles. Names scribbled in code. Across from him sat Aminata Sari, the head of internal intelligence. A woman most underestimated until it was far too late. We got the vial from the boy, she said, placing a sealed bag on the table. Inside, a tiny sliver of glass glinted red. VX-9 derivative. Custom. Manufactured outside the continent. Foreign? Traoré asked. Professional, she answered. But local hands were holding it. The boy was recruited 6 weeks ago. Orphan. Promised money. Given a uniform and a story. He said anything. Only one name, she said, opening her notebook. Said he was instructed by someone called Father Secco. Traoré leaned back slowly. The name wasn't new. It wasn't even surprising. Secco had once been a priest. A beloved voice of the people. Then the war came, and he became something else. Something quiet and venomous. He'd disappeared a year ago, vanished into the folds of rural resistance networks. Rumors painted him as a radical. A ghost. Some said he'd aligned with external funders. Others whispered he wasn't even alive. But Traoré knew better. Some ghosts breathed. I want eyes on every satellite village east of Tenkadogo, he said. If he's there, we smoke him out. Quietly. Aminata nodded, already scribbling notes. But Traoré's eyes lingered on the cup still sitting in front of him. "You know," he said, voice softer now, "my grandmother used to say you can judge a man by how he drinks his tea." "And what about those who refuse it?" Aminata asked. Traoré smiled faintly. "They live." Then he stood. "I'll make a statement tomorrow. Public. Controlled. No mention of the attempt, just a reminder. A subtle one." Aminata raised a brow. "Subtlety isn't usually your weapon." "It is now," he replied. "Because if the traitors want quiet, I'll give them thunder beneath the silence." That night, on the national broadcast, Captain Traoré stood before the nation in a simple black uniform. No flags. No podium. Just a man and a camera. He didn't speak long. He didn't need to. "Sometimes," he said, "we're offered things that taste sweet but rot the soul. Sometimes, what we refuse defines us more than what we accept." He held up the cup. And then, without a word, he placed it down. That clip went viral within minutes. No one said the word poison. No one had to. In the early hours of the next morning, the surveillance team picked up movement near the edge of the Volta border. A grainy drone feed showed an unmarked convoy pulling into a rundown mission house once known for baptisms and now rumored to be a hideout for political exiles. Father Secco had returned to holy ground. Aminata was already in the field, coordinating the quiet encirclement. No helicopters. No uniforms. Just shadowed boots and radio silence. Traoré had made it clear, no fire, no spectacle. This was a man who moved through whispers. He needed to be caught in one. Inside the palace, Traoré reviewed the latest report in his office, a room so bare it could have been mistaken for a barracks. His desk was scratched. His chair creaked. On the wall, a single map, not of borders, but of food routes, medicine trails, and signal black zones. The real arteries of the country. Beside him sat a small, black envelope. No sender. Just the presidential seal in wax, cracked clean through the center. Inside was a letter. Handwritten. No threats. Just scripture. Even the Son of Man drank with his betrayer. You refused your cup. So tell me, Captain, which of us fears truth more? It was signed, S. He read it twice, then burned it without flinching. That evening, Aminata returned with her team. The mission house was empty. But it hadn't always been. They left in a hurry, she said. Books were burning in the fireplace when we arrived. Maps, too. One of our men found this. She held up a photograph. Traoré took it. The image was blurred but unmistakable. It was Coulibaly. And he wasn't in isolation. He was broken out before nightfall, she said. 3 men, uniforms stolen. They had codes. Someone inside helped them. Traoré stared at the photo for a long time, then handed it back. We're not hunting one man, he said. We're chasing a belief. Aminata hesitated, then leaned closer. He's building something, Ibrahim. Not just rebellion. A myth. People out there, they're saying you've been compromised. That your silence means fear. Traoré didn't look at her. His gaze was on the map. But his voice was steady. Then it's time I remind them. The next day, Traoré arrived unannounced at a rural academy north of the capital, a school rebuilt by volunteer soldiers and local mothers after the civil unrest. No press. No ceremony. Just a quiet arrival and the sound of young feet on red dirt. He spoke with teachers. With farmers. With a girl who had once walked 20 kilometers for a single textbook. And in the center of the courtyard, he placed the same ceramic cup. A teacher approached, confused. Captain, why bring this? Traoré looked at the children running in circles, their laughter rising like song. Because symbols matter, he said. And this one was meant to kill me. The teacher froze. But I didn't drink, he continued. And now, it holds something more powerful than poison. Memory. Word spread fast. In villages, people carved small wooden cups and painted lions on their sides. In markets, vendors whispered about that silent refusal. Some claimed Traoré had known about the attempt all along. Others said he saw death in dreams. But beneath the growing legend, something darker brewed. One night, a train carrying medical supplies derailed under mysterious circumstances. No survivors. The driver had once served under Coulibaly. 2 days later, a council elder was found dead, no signs of violence, but a cryptic line scratched into his desk, "Drink before it's too late." Panic began to seep through the capital. And so Traoré summoned the Council of 12, his most trusted advisors, to the old palace vault. A place where no devices were allowed, where conversations couldn't be leaked, and where betrayal had nowhere to hide. He walked in with nothing but the black and white photo of Coulibaly in his pocket and one simple question. Who told him how to escape? No one answered. But their silence spoke volumes. Someone in this room, he said, doesn't believe I'll survive this. He laid the photo on the table, letting them all see what he already knew. This is no longer about my life, he said. It's about what we stand for. One of the elders, a woman named Nana Effia, older than most wars, spoke then. They are trying to make you the story, she said, her voice a low hum. You must make the story bigger than you. Traoré nodded slowly. I will. That night, a quiet order went out, find Father Seko. Not to kill him. Not to parade him. But to bring him in alive. For a conversation the nation needed to hear. One that would not be scripted, sanitized, or safe. Aminata knew it was dangerous. But she also knew, the captain wasn't just hunting a man anymore. He was calling the shadows into the light. They found him not in exile, but in plain sight. Father Seko had taken refuge in the crumbling remains of a colonial courthouse, long abandoned to dust and wind. He lived among books and silence. No guards. No weapons. Just sermons, written, not preached, left on torn scraps tucked beneath doorways and wrapped around sacks of rice. He was not hiding. He was waiting. When the agents arrived, he offered them tea. They refused. He laughed. Traoré arrived 2 hours later. No convoy. No weapons drawn. Just one man with dust on his boots and a stare that did not blink. The two men stood in the main hall, sunlight leaking through broken windows, casting lines across the floor like a cage of light. Seko sat. Traoré remained standing. You've come a long way, Seko said, voice warm. All for a ghost. You stopped being a ghost the moment children began whispering your name with fear, Traoré replied. Seko smiled. Fear is a seed. From it grows truth. Fear is a weapon, Traoré corrected. One you've used against the same people you claim to serve. Seko leaned forward. And what have you used, Captain? Speeches? Symbols? That cup you parade around like a holy relic? Traoré didn't answer. So Seko continued, eyes gleaming. You've built a myth around your refusal. Clever. Elegant. But in the end, what did it change? Corruption still breathes. Hunger still walks. Foreign hands still tug at your borders. You may have refused poison, Ibrahim, but you drank the illusion. Traoré stepped forward, slowly. I didn't survive that day to build a myth, he said. I survived it so the myth would die. Seko's smile faded. I'm not here to kill you, Traoré added. I'm here to let you speak. The old priest raised a brow. To who? To the nation. That evening, for the first time in decades, the old courthouse became a stage. There were no guards on screen. No banners. Just 2 chairs. 2 men. 1 camera. And a question. Why did you try to kill me? Seko didn't flinch. I tried to stop a story from being written, he said. Because stories are more dangerous than bullets. And yours was beginning to sound too much like salvation. Traoré nodded slowly. And who writes yours? Seko looked into the lens. The betrayed. The silenced. The ones who gave you their faith and got nothing but speeches. And how do you answer them now? Traoré asked. After the bombs? After the train? After the poisoned cup? I remind them, Seko said, voice unwavering, that revolutions are not gentle things. They're born in fire. And sometimes, the fire burns too wide. A pause. Heavy. Costly. Then Traoré turned to the camera. You hear him, he said. Now hear me. He picked up the same ceramic cup, placed between them like a third voice. This cup was meant to kill me. That much we all understand. But the truth is, it did. Seko looked up, startled. The man who sat beneath the neem tree that day died, Traoré said. And in his place, something else rose, not perfect, not pure, but willing. Willing to carry the weight. He placed the cup down gently. Because leadership, he continued, is not about power. It's about what you refuse. Seko stared at him, and for a moment, the fire in his eyes dimmed. Not in defeat, but in recognition. The broadcast ended without a verdict. No applause. No chants. Just the quiet of a nation absorbing what it had seen. The next day, Seko was taken into custody. No shackles. No parade. Just silence. And that silence echoed. In the days that followed, something shifted. At government checkpoints, soldiers placed ceramic cups on their desks beside rifles, silent reminders. In villages, school teachers spoke not of punishments, but of choices. And at the academy, cadets were asked to write essays, not on battle strategy, but on the moment they would choose to refuse. Traoré watched all this unfold not from the palace, but from the road. He visited fields. Clinics. Places where his name was known only in rumor. And everywhere he went, people asked only one question. Will the cup return? Because it had become more than a vessel. It had become a question. A test. And now, it was their turn to answer it. The sky above the capital cracked open with light as dawn arrived, not with noise, but with quiet determination. It was the anniversary. 1 year since the cup had not been drunk. 1 year since betrayal had been served in silence and returned with resolve. The date was not declared a holiday. No statues were unveiled. But across the nation, something moved. At the military academy, the courtyard was filled, not with weapons, but with chairs. One by one, recruits entered. Not in formation, but in reflection. In the center stood a stone pedestal, plain and unmarked. And atop it sat the same ceramic cup. No inscription. No plaque. Just the memory of what it almost was, and what it had become. Traoré stood at the edge of the gathering. No podium. No guards. His presence was enough. He waited until the murmurs died, until the air felt thick with the kind of stillness that comes only before something sacred. Then he stepped forward. There are no words, he began, that can undo what this cup was meant to do. He paused, scanning the crowd, not for applause, but understanding. This object was meant to silence me. Instead, it taught me how to speak. He raised the cup, not in triumph, but in tribute. Because what matters is not that I survived. What matters is that we learned why we must never kneel, not to fear, not to power, not even to comfort. He placed it back down. And this time, he stepped aside. A young cadet, barely 20, walked forward. She wore no rank insignia, only a quiet fire in her eyes. She placed her hand gently on the cup, then looked at her peers. We do not pass the cup to honor a man, she said. We pass it to honor the moment we all must face. The moment we choose. She lifted the cup, held it for only a heartbeat, then passed it to the next cadet. One by one, they followed. Not fast. Not rehearsed. Just a quiet rhythm of hands and legacy. And as the sun rose fully, painting the academy in gold, the final cadet placed the cup back where it began. The circle was complete. From a balcony above, an elder watched with tears he did not try to hide. He turned to Traoré, who stood still, arms crossed, as if bracing against an invisible wind. "You've made a ritual," the elder said. "No," Traoré replied. "I reminded them of the cost." In the months that followed, the reform deepened. Government positions were no longer announced through ceremonies, but through declarations of service. Each candidate asked a single question on record. "What would you have done with the cup?" Some answered with philosophy. Others with silence. But the question itself became the gate. In markets, children carved their own cups from clay. In schools, history teachers told the story not as a myth, but as a challenge. And at the borders, where foreign eyes still watched, something more dangerous than resistance took root: vigilance. Seko remained in custody. But his trial was never televised. His punishment was not prison bars, it was irrelevance. His story had been exposed, and the people had chosen which cup to lift. And yet, even as unity spread, so did the whispers. A new splinter group began to rise in the far west. Their symbol? A shattered cup. Their slogan? "The lion sleeps." When asked about it in a private briefing, Traoré only smiled. "Let them believe that," he said. "Because lions do not roar to boast. They roar to remind the forest that they still watch." Years passed. The capital grew. Roads once choked by potholes and politics began to breathe. Schools were built. Farms cooperated. Flags flew not just on buildings, but on hearts. And through it all, the cup remained. Not in a vault. Not behind glass. But in circulation. Every year, it traveled, hand to hand, town to town, resting in the care of a new group of young citizens tasked with guarding not just the object, but the meaning behind it. One spring, it arrived in a village far to the south. There, a boy no older than 9 stood before it, staring as if it held the entire sky inside. When asked what he saw, he said only, "This is how you say no without shouting." Traoré grew older. The lines deepened on his face, not from power, but from carrying what power never could: responsibility. He never asked for praise. Never wore medals. But the people did not forget. And when he finally stepped down, leaving office without drama or decree, the new leader elected by a wide margin asked to meet him, not in the palace, but beneath the neem tree where it all began. They drank tea. From different cups. But together. The new leader asked, "What if they try again? What if someone else brings poison?" Traoré smiled. "Then they'll find a nation that no longer drinks with its eyes closed." That night, as he walked alone through the gardens behind his home, he paused beneath a sky blanketed with stars. He thought not of titles, nor speeches, nor even survival. He thought of a single moment, long ago, when a hand reached for a cup and paused. He had not lifted it then. And everything had changed. Behind him, in a small cabinet, rested the cup. Worn. Chipped. Silent. It would never be full again. But it had poured something into the world that could never be emptied. And that was enough.